Okay, Bonnie, why don't we get started?
Okay. Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is the second Tuesday of the month, and so this is the AARP Massachusetts edition of Fraud Talk Tuesday. We are here the second Tuesday of each month from 12 to 12:30, where we discuss a different scam and how you can protect yourself and your family from becoming victimized. My name is Bonnie Weigel. I'm a volunteer with AARP Massachusetts. Our guest today is Dennis Hohengasser, also a volunteer with the AARP Massachusetts Speakers Bureau. Today's topic is protecting your children from scams. Whether you are a parent, grandparent, or a caregiver for a youngster or a teen, you may have joined us today with some questions already in mind. If you have, please put them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Or if questions come to mind during the presentation, please feel free to put them into the Q&A. This session is being recorded. You'll receive a link to the recording following the session that you can share with your family and friends. At the end of the presentation, we'll also share a page with links to a number of related resources that would be very helpful to you. We'll start today with a polling question that will appear that we would love you to respond to. Please go ahead. Well, it looks like you're all in the right place. And I think it is pretty universal that social media is widely used, not just by our young people, but by all of us. Today, we're going to talk about how criminals target children for identity theft and fraud. We'll finish up with 4 tips for talking to your children and grandchildren about fraud and online scams. So to get us started, can you provide us with a few facts, Dennis? I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. With today's presentation, you're going to gain some scam prevention tips that will help shield you, your young people that are in your life from the online dangers that are out there. A new survey finds that nearly 1 million kids were targeted by criminals online in the past year. It's a type of crime that just sends shivers through parents and grandparents. And it starts with a criminal steals a child identity and uses the youngster's personal information to, say, open up a credit card or make an online purchase. And such crimes go undetected for years because kids aren't filing taxes or applying for loans, which are typically flags identity theft and identity fraud. Remember that when a child is born, paperwork is submitted and an SSN is provided for that child, and it sits there for years and years. Child identity fraud is a serious problem across this country. Nearly over 900,000 children, 1 in 80, were targets of identity theft.
So Dennis, what accounts for this growth in scams targeting young people?
Well, it's kind of an easy answer. It's due in large part to the growth of social media and the time that young people spend online, plus the increased reliance on digital transactions. It just opens the doors to cyber criminals. And it's a costly problem too. Losses tied to child ID fraud. And let me make a distinction here. ID theft and ID fraud are 2 different things. ID theft is when they actually steal the child's information or yours. Identity fraud is when they use it to open up an account or make a purchase. But the losses tied to child identity fraud reached $680 million. But the good news is it's down from last year, which was about over $900 million. And that's possibly due to the greater public awareness. And that's why presentations like these that provide education, information, and awareness, and then taking this information and discussing it with your children and grandchildren is our first line of defense. In resolving child ID fraud took families an average of 16 hours, up from 13 hours last year. It's a major headache for both consumers and parents, and for financial institutions who absorb some of the losses, especially when the child's information is used to create something they called a synthetic identity, which is a mashup of details from a real person and a phony one. And these who are targeted are children, the elderly, and homeless individuals. And why? These populations may be less likely to use credit or to monitor their credit history. And that's why it's critical to educate children and adults who care for them about safe practices online and ways to look out for identity fraud. You know, monitoring kids' online behavior is extremely important, particularly when they're very young. You know, many kids are online. 51% of households reported first allowing their children to access the internet at the age of 6 or younger. And that's when it's particularly easy for them to accidentally click on a link that's malicious. It could either download malware onto their device, or it could take them to an unwanted website.
Unfortunately, fraud is everywhere. But when it comes to younger people, what are some of the extra risks posed by social media?
Well, younger people fall prey to many of the same scams that older people do, but they are increasingly targeted with pitches customized to their generation. Not mine and not yours, Bonnie, but theirs. One example is criminals often help people become online influencers. And this is a term I've heard recently with mainly TikTok. And an influencer is someone who has the power to affect the purchasing decisions of others because of either their authority, their knowledge, their position, their relationship with their audience, and oftentimes have a large audience that follows them on one of these social media sites. Oftentimes you'll see these sites where they'll ask you to subscribe or like me, and that connects you to them. But the most troubling of all are something called sextortion scams, in which criminals solicit explicit photos from young people, and then they blackmail them. And the FBI says this scam is on the rise. Amy Knopfsinger, who is the AARP director of fraud victim support, says that this sextortion scam can start on things like a gaming app. I'm not a gamer. I don't play games online. So this is something that surprised me. But on a gaming app, on a website, or on a social media platform. And she wants parents and older adults to say to the younger people in their lives, if you ever hear of anyone struggling with this, talk to somebody. Because younger people may share this with a peer and not with an adult. You know, young people are vulnerable because so much of their daily life happens online. Young people are far more likely to be on the receiving end of peer pressure to be online. But, you know, not just to be online, not just consuming the content, but to create it, producing it, and posting it. And once they post anything out there, it's out there. A scammer has access to it, and you cannot get it back. You can delete it, but if someone has taken that before you were able to delete it, they have it. That means there are lots of opportunities out there for scammers.
So what can we do to protect our families?
Well, there's a number of things. We can start, let's start with the parents and grandparents. First of all, protect your children and your grandchildren, or to protect them. You should avoid using passwords that include combinations of their identifiable information, such as a child's birth date. These numbers are easy to remember, but criminals can, if they get them, they could use them to gain access to an adult's email or to a bank account. And criminals might pretend to be someone the child knows and ask for personal information. And the child may share it without even realizing how vulnerable that makes it. It may seem very innocuous to the kid, but it has potential value to a scammer. And if a child accepts a friend request from a spoofed account, the criminal can potentially have access to the people the child is connected to online, all their friends. Bad actors may try to friend a grandparent or other family member, pretending to be one of the child's pals. And this whole cycle just perpetuates itself. And a child becoming a victim of identity theft can quickly lead to a parent or grandparent being compromised in some way, all through social engineering.
Do you have any really specific tips for us?
Yeah, here's a few. First of all, educate yourself. That's why we're doing these Fraud Talk Tuesdays. We should educate ourselves and your children who are in your care about safe online behavior. Teach them not to accept friend requests from people that they don't know or people that they are already friends with, and not to provide personal information online to anyone. They may seem like a friend. Oh, they're just asking a few simple questions. These questions help build a profile. Monitor their social media use, since children with unlimited internet access are more vulnerable to identity fraud. So it's important to keep track of what they're on. Be careful about what you and your children post on social media. It can become a virtual buffet for scammers if you don't limit who can see it. Personal information should be kept private. And monitor your own financial accounts. Consider freezing your child's credit until they are old enough to look for a job or open up a checking account or apply for a student loan or for credit. And we have links at the very end as to how you can do that.
And what can we do to help the younger family members avoid the scammers?
Well, when asked who they trust most, those same teens and 20-somethings say that their parents and their grandparents are the ones they trust. So in this case, take the bait. Be their guide through this treacherous landscape of modern fraud. Because if we don't participate and help them out, and help solve the problem, then we become part of the problem. But when a teen thinks that he or she did something wrong or embarrassing, going to a parent can be hard, which makes the role of other family members more crucial: an aunt, a grandparent, a sibling. I mean, there are countless anecdotal evidence out there that it's grandparents alerting parents that something is going on, usually on social media. Oftentimes, it's easier for kids to talk to another adult family member. And kids will say things to grandparents that they won't say to a parent. I mean, you can take that advantage of that special relationship and have a much more open conversation.
That's interesting. And I'm sure there are a lot of grandparents out there who have had information shared by their grandchildren that maybe doesn't go to the parents. Early on, you mentioned 4 tips for talking to your kids and your grandkids about fraud. What are those 4 tips? I think we're ready.
Okay, the first one. First of all, start the conversation about fraud. Let them know that you are ready to listen, that, again, we are the adults in the situation. We have to bring it up. And if we don't, again, we are part of the problem if we don't bring it up to them. Start by mentioning a scam that you've heard about either on the news, or ask them if they've heard about some scam that's from school or from one of their friends. So engage in a conversation. Ask what they would do if they were victimized by a scam. Who would they talk to? Number two, I think, has to be the hardest one. Don't judge. Tell them that they can come to you no matter what's happening, and that you'll be open and non-judgmental and not be angry. And if they do come to you with a problem, lead with something like, thanks for telling me. We can figure this out together. And save your shock and your anger for a private space of your own. If you want them to keep telling you things, it's best not to overreact. Like I told you, this is probably the hardest one of the four. Keep being positive and affirming. Number three, share social media and online safety tips with them. When talking about identity theft, suggest that they not give out their birth date, home address, or other seemingly innocuous information on social media, because scammers can use this to apply for credit cards. This whole thing, putting one of the things in particular with Facebook, and you put your birth date on there, and your birthday comes, and you get all these different happy birthday wishes from all of your friends on Facebook. Well, that birth date's important to scammers. Remind them to think before they click on either links in an email, in a tweet, in text messages, in social media messages, surveys and quizzes, online ads, and think before they click. This whole thing about quizzes and online ads, they seem kind of cute sometimes. They you fill it out. Sometimes, again, it seems like innocuous information you're putting out there, but it's helping the scammer build a profile, and you don't know where that information is going. And when talking about the perils of fake shopping websites, explain to them that scammers frequently use and set up online stores that look very much like legit retailers, even with their the URL they use. One I've seen frequently is Target, and the Target, instead of www.target, Target, there's either two T's. They reverse the R and the G, and you don't notice that, but that is a fake website. And coach them on how to become a sleuth. Should they ever come across an unfamiliar online store, they can do a web search and put the name of that store online and include the terms like scam or fraud that might reveal some shocking truths about that site or some complaints that people have posted. And finally, show interest in their digital devices. Now, whether it's an iPad or a phone or their laptop. Ask to see the new apps that they're excited about. After being appropriately impressed, ask them about the privacy and security settings that go with this new app. Things like, can they choose a multi-factor authentication? A lot of banks use that now. You use your ID, your password, and they send you a code. Things like make your friends list private. Turning off location sharing on your phone or tablet. And think about turning off something called geotagging on smartphones and tablets. When you take a picture with one of these devices, it embeds location data as to where the picture was taken. So geotags can initiate a security risk. Embedding locations into photos and then posting them right online immediately puts your exact location out there for the world to see. Online predators, bullying people, and people in general are able to see where you are, therefore making it easier to find you, and some with ill intentions. So safety has to be the first conversation, because with every new app, and also apps that are updated whenever an app updated on or a social media site is updated, that sometimes can affect privacy settings. So if your child or grandchild does not know how to change the privacy settings, you can help them do it. Oftentimes it's going into settings on the device and looking for those. And if you're not sure exactly how to do it with the type of device you have, you can go to YouTube and type in how do I change security settings on my phone or my tablet? Whether I have an Android and it's pretty simple there. I don't know how Apple works, but yeah, you use YouTube, but make sure that when you use it and when you go to that site that it's a valid site.
Dennis, these are such helpful suggestions. I've heard a lot of what you said, not just for children and grandchildren, but for myself, that I need to get my act together on a few things. You also mentioned a list of resources. Can you share that with us?
Funny you should ask. Here we go. Let me go to here. Let me go to here. Slideshow. And let's go to here. There's a couple. These you're going to get a copy of this slide, and these are links. You can click on any one of these links, the blue links. You can find out how and when and how to check or freeze credit for yourself or for your children. As a matter of fact, freezing credit can be a little scary because you have to go to one of these. And this link will bring you to the three sites: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And when you freeze your credit, one thing you do have to put in is your social security number, because that's how we are all tracked. But use this link to get to that point, and it talks about how and when to freeze. You might want to freeze your children or grandchildren's credit. The other thing you can do is put a credit alert, and a credit alert says if anyone's trying to inquire on someone's credit, you're going to be notified. It's usually via email or by text, however you ask to have it done. The Fraud Watch Network is a website that AARP has put up, and it is a wealth of information, constantly updated articles. You can actually go on and click on get Fraud Watch alerts. They come out every other week, and it's a great way of keeping in the forefront of your mind that fraud is always out there. And they always focus on one of the frauds, either that's current or that's surfacing around a certain type of holiday or like shopping season, Veterans Day with the veterans fraud scams and those types of things. If you or someone you know has been victimized by a scam, you can log on to this AARP fraud support and click on register, and you can. These are virtual I'm missing the word, sessions where it's led by a skilled person, and they talk about how do you get over the trauma of being scammed. Are you going to get your money back? Chances are slim to none usually, but just the emotional trauma that you go through can be very, very difficult to deal with, and sometimes hard to admit to other people that you've been scammed. There's a couple articles here on criminals increasingly targeting teens, how to protect your child from identity theft from the Federal Trade Commission, and another identitytheft.gov from the Federal Trade Commission. And the very bottom, there's the Fraud Watch helpline. If you think you've been victimized, call this line and talk to the folks. The way it works is you're going to talk to a live person when you call, and they're going to take some information down, and within 24 hours, usually the same day, I hear, they get someone from AARP Fraud Watch Helpline is going to call and help you work through what you should do next to stay safe. So those are some of the things that that are out there, and you're going to get a copy of this slide. So let me do stop sharing, and a couple questions. Someone asked, should I report? Yes, if you have been victimized, it's important to report it, especially if you've lost money. Report it to the local police. Sometimes they may balk at taking a report, but make sure they take the report, especially if you've lost money and there's any hope of getting it back. They're going to often ask, did you file a police report? You can report it to the Federal Trade Commission, ftc.gov, and you can report it to the Fraud Watch helpline. People say, well, sometimes no one gets back to me. They may not, but what they do is they unless they know about the scams going on, they can't fight those scams. And that's what, again, some of these fraud watch alerts that are sent out from the AARP Fraud Watch Network, they're focused on what people are reporting. One of the things that I always want to include in these presentations is something called under the ether. When AARP put this program together years ago for the Fraud Watch Network, they went out to prisons and asked scammers, why are you so successful at taking people's money and their ID and information? And they all said the same thing. You got to get them under the ether. You had to get them into a heightened emotional state so they are not thinking logically anymore, but they are thinking emotionally. And that could be something like, say, the grandparent scheme. You get a call from what seems to be a grandchild saying that they're in some kind of trouble, and grandparents will do anything for their grandkids. And there's the emotional trigger, fear. I've got to help out. It could be excitement. Think of your kids. I mean, being online, being able to connect with people that they think that are their friends out there. Again, heightened emotional state. It could be. I mean, we all hear about the lottery. You won the lottery. Everyone played their Mega Millions for tonight. I think it's 1.5 billion. But you won the lottery. People excited, and they're not thinking, why could this be a scam? They're thinking emotionally. And I cannot tell you how powerful that emotion is. That's what got me in trouble once, probably about 9 years ago. And almost, after doing this for about 4 or 5 years, almost again about 2 years ago. And it had to do with getting me in a heightened emotional state. So remember some of the tips we gave about turning off those geotags in on your phones and your kids' phones so they don't know where you are. You know, it's great if you're on vacation to read, I can't remember where this was. Geotags would help you, but generally speaking, probably not a good idea. And again, thinking about freezing your credit if you don't need credit, or at least putting a credit alert, and that link in the slide that you're going to get will help you lead you through that process. So let's see if there's any more questions. I don't see any. So Bonnie, back to you.
Hey, thanks, Dennis. This is very valuable information. As a reminder to everyone, you are going to receive a link to this recording so you can look at it again. You can share it with friends and family, and please do that. As Dennis said, information, awareness, and education is our best defense to avoid scams. For next month, on the second Tuesday, which happens to be September 12th, our topic will be fraud support, the AARP Fraud Watch Helpline and virtual support groups. Please join us for that valuable session. And thank you very much for joining us today. Have a good day.
Thanks, Bonnie.